Hello and good evening to everyone. Welcome to yet another session on standards on internal audit and overview. Uh, our today's welcome address would be addressed by the very charming CA Charanjot Singh Nanda sir, the Central Council member and chairman of the Internal Audit Standard Board ICAI. Welcome, Nanda sir.
Thank you, Vikas. I welcome you all. I am very delighted to see the chairman of ICAI, Kozhikode branch, Mr. Arun. The two very revered speakers of the day, CA Amit Jaiswal, my younger brother, and CA Devyang Desai. The very able moderator of the day, CA Vikas Gupta, Madam Aarti, Mr. Mansukh, Mr. Arun Agarwal from ISB, and all. It is a proud privilege to invite you all today for this exciting session on internal audit standards. Let me tell you that we had a board meeting 2 hours back, and our total impetus, our total thought process was to create newer standards, put them for public comments, and then take it to the council so that they can be made mandatory. We as a council are very keen to ensure that we give the best of the standards to our chartered accountants so that they are able to add value to the assignment of the internal audit which is entrusted to them. Not taking much of the time, I give the dais back to Vikas Gupta for further proceedings. Vikas, the dais is all yours now.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to call upon CA Arun Subramaniam, sir, the chairman of Kozhikode branch, for his opening remarks on this wonderful session.
Thank you, Vikas, sir. Good evening, all. Respected Central Council member and chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board, CA Charanjot Singh Nanda, sir. Central Council member and Vice Chairman CA Anilesh Bhandari sir, other distinguished persons and faculties of the day, and my dear members. It is indeed a pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all on behalf of Kozhikode branch of ICAI in conducting this one-day VCM on internal audit. I am extremely happy today to share the dais with these distinguished persons. Today's session has been designed and developed to introduce to you the concepts of internal audit standards, which will be detailedly dealt with by the eminent faculties during the course of the session. We are being facing a very unprecedented situation in which we have to basically go on an online mode and conduct all our teachings and seminars in this online mode. As chairman of Kozhikode branch of ICAI, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the chairman IASB who gave us continuous support and allotted us the program today under the banner of the auspicious committee. I hereby take this opportunity to welcome all the members all round who has taken time to hear, learn and update the knowledge. As you all know, the committee has been doing great works and coming forward with internal audit standards. Many of us professionals would be deputing our staff and articles to carry out the audit works. Even though internal audit is mandatory only for certain class of companies, today many are using it nevertheless to increase and have more controls in their respective organizations. As this report is for internal purpose and directly reported to the management, we take due care while reporting. Taking these, internal audit standards have been formulated to standardize the working and to have more aligned nature of rules to carry out the same. Thus, we at the branch level thought a seminar of internal audit standards would benefit all members at large in understanding the way ahead to carry out the work. We are today fortunate enough to have this program under the Committee of Internal Audit Standards Board. Today, detailed analysis on standards of internal audit 310, 320, 110 and 120 dealing with planning, audit evidences, nature of assurance and internal control aspects will be dealt with by the respective faculties. I would once again take this opportunity to thank all team members of IASB in supporting us in this endeavor. I thank all members who have joined this program and wishing all a great learning experience. Stay safe and wishing you all the best. Thank you. Over to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I would now like to read out a brief profile of CA Charanjot Singh Nanda, sir, after your warming inauguration session. Nanda, sir, is a Central Council member, is a current Council member from 2019 till 2022 of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He was a member Quality Review Board set up by the Government of India. He was the member of the council from 2004 to 2016, straight 12 years. He was the chairman of Committee of Internal Audit of ICI and also the chairman of Committee of Members in Industry of ICI. He was the chairman of Women Members Empowerment Committee of ICI. He was the vice chairman of Committee on Public Finance and Government Accounting. Sir was also the chairman of Professional Development Committee. He was also the chairman and NPO sectors. Hello.
You are audible, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
You're audible, Vikas, please.
Okay, sir. Sir was also the chairman of the research committee. He was also the chairman of banking, insurance, and pensions. Sir, I could not read full of your profile. It's very long. It would take, I guess, around 2 hours. It would cover full of our session.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you. A very scintillating address by the chairman, ICI Kozhikode branch, Mr. Arun Subramaniam. So, ladies and gentlemen, spare a moment. I would just come back with my PPT. Hold for a second, please. In the meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to tell you that ultimately this institute, which was set up an act of parliament way back on 1st July 1949, and that was a time when the constitution to this country was not promulgated. You're aware that the constitution to this great country was adopted on 26 January 1950. So the pertinent question that arises is what prompted the Constituent Assembly to set up an Institute of Chartered Accountants of India? The reason was very simple, very candid. They were looking for a disciplined band of soldiers to create value and worth in the working of the country. We chartered accountants are financial soldiers, and we work in tandem to ensure that we give the best of our services. Up at the left on the ladder. Hold for a second, sir. Is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. So I would just start my keynote address. Just a second. Today we'll be covering standards on internal audit SIA 110, which is nature of assurance. Standard on internal audit SIA 120, which is internal controls. The third is SIA 310, planning the internal audit assignment. And the fourth is SIA 320, internal audit evidence. So standard on internal audit SIA 110, nature of assurance. So what does SIA 110 say? This standard primarily deals with assurance assignments performed by internal auditors. And the main objective of this standard is to provide three very important things. Number one, whether the internal auditor can provide an opinion on assurance. The basic purpose of our indulgence, the basic purpose of our engagement is to ensure what we can add value. Essential requirements which must be required: professional skepticism, professional judgment, which we need to provide the assurance. And third, nature of assurance that can be provided, whether it is reasonable or limited and under what circumstances. I would like to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are the only country in the world and the only institute in the country which has come out with this standard, because it speaks of limited assurance. If you don't get proper documents, you give a limited assurance. Next, standard on internal audit SIA 120, internal controls. Now, what are internal controls? Very importantly, it speaks of the control environment. What does an internal control ensure with the help of the auditor? It provides a common terminology on internal controls to prevent ambiguity or confusion on the subject matter. What you are uttering, the same has to be understood. The basic impedient in communication is the gap. So to eradicate the gap, you have to define the internal controls, how they mitigate risk. Risks are there in each and every business. How internal control helps to mitigate the unwanted risk, the unwarranted risk which may spring from some other way, and also how they are viewed from a legal perspective. It also envisages to explain the responsibilities of management and auditors with regard to internal controls. which is mandated by the prevalent laws and regulations. And it intends to specify certain requirements which need to be met to be able to provide an independent assurance on internal controls in the organization under review. So the important facet is providing common terminology, defining internal controls, explaining the responsibilities both of the management and internal auditor, and specifying certain requirements which are very, very important, which are very integral when you want to speak of the internal controls. SIA 120 on internal controls, I just discussed some time back. This standard clarifies the responsibilities of management and auditors over internal controls. There are certain areas which is envisaged by the management, and how the process control system is evaluated by the internal auditor is defined here. How certain requirements need to be met to assess, evaluate, report, and provide an independent assurance over internal controls is the prime objective of this standard. Next, SIA 310. Planning the internal audit assignment is again very, very important. What you need in an internal audit assignment, sub number 1, the assignments are specific to the part of the entity. They cover a particular auditable unit, which is a location, which can be a function, which can be a business unit, a legal entity, including third parties where relevant when it comes to the third vendor party or third party premises. Then it also is specific in nature. It covers the manner in which a particular audit assignment will be conducted with details of the auditable unit, such as the business activities or proceeds needs to be audited so that things are put in the right esteem. Going from here, the third step is assignments need to be generally completed during a short period of time. It is not something which is totally in sync with the working. And lastly, it is prepared by the internal auditor. The assignment is done by the internal auditor, and it needs engagement staff or external service provider if it is pertinent to do so. The office can do it, the in-house staff can do it, or an outside internal auditor can do that. Next, SIA 310. This is again planning the internal audit. Here you need to understand the assignment planning. The assignment planning, audit planning is very important. So the assignment planning shall follow a laid down procedure, the outcome of which shall be a very comprehensive, largely worded, written document which contains all the essential elements required to help achieve the objective of assignment planning. The planning has to be clear. You are aware of an old idiom which says people never fail to plan. People never plan to fail. They generally fail to plan. This standard provides guidance on the knowledge process, the knowledge of the business and its environment, discussions with management, risk assessment, which is again a very important facet, audit methodology and depth of coverage so that the person reading the report knows the level of inference he has to draw, technology deployment, which is again a very important facet in recent days, resource allocation and documentation. Now we come on to the last standard, which is SIA 320, internal audit evidence. Now, what is internal audit evidence? Internal audit evidence, this standard tries to explain certain key requirements in the process of collection, retention, and subsequent review of internal audit evidence. Evidence has to be taken at par with the Indian Evidence Act 1872. It can be a circumstantial evidence, it can be evidence which is a documentary evidence, but it has to create a trail for itself so that it can be conclusively understood that this evidence has value. This standard provides guidance on nature of evidence, how we want to classify that evidence, reliability and consistency of that evidence so that you are able to very squarely believe that evidence, evidence collection and recording process, and documentation so that you are able to properly work on that. And the last slide, gathering appropriate and reliable audit evidence. You need to confirm the nature, timing, and sufficiency of the audit procedures undertaken as per the internal audit plan and terms of engagement. The term of engagement and audit planning puts at parlance what has to be done, what has to be the nature, the timing, and sufficiency. Second, you need to aid in the supervision and review of the audit, internal audit work. Very, very important. You have, as an internal auditor, you aid, you help in supervising and review reviewing the assignment. And thirdly, you need to establish that the work which is performed is in conformity with the applicable pronouncement of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you all for giving me an opportunity to speak to you and put across my views. I want to just tell you that on an integrated basis, standards is something that will put us at a parallels. Mr. Subramaniam, the chairman of Kozhikode branch, very rightly said that standardize the entire process so that nobody can take shelter in not very good practices, defining the inference drawn from those standards. So I want to thank you all for giving me a great opportunity. Over to Mr. Vikas Gupta for further proceedings. Vikas, the dial is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That was very knowledgeable that you said. Now, for the upcoming topic, I would like to introduce and welcome CA Devang Desai, sir, to start his session on Standard on Internal Auditing 310 and 320. I would read out his brief profile. Devang sir is a partner in Deloitte since April 2015 in the internal audit team. I would read out his key engagement that he has managed. He has led the internal audit capital project advisory engagement for clients in pharmaceuticals, real estate, and infrastructure sectors. Internal audit and process review for companies in media and entertainment. Lead contract risk services engagement for companies in media, shipping, chemicals and fertilizers, financial institution, and private equity having large portfolio investments. Led risk management and design of internal finance control for leading infrastructure companies and listed MNC life science companies. Internal audit project advisory capital projects. Sir has also led internal audit capital advisory engagement in pharmaceutical, real estate, and infrastructure sectors. A very warm welcome, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desai. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you give me the right so that I can put the presentation slide?
1 second, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, now?
Is it visible?
Very much. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nanda, and thank you everybody for giving the opportunity to discuss on the standard on internal audit, planning the internal audit assignment, and internal audit evidence. First, I will cover on the planning, the key aspects of the planning, why it is required prior to start of the audit, what are the importance of audit evidences, and what are the critical aspects of evidences and audit plan which has been incorporated into the standard. So before I start, I want to give a basic understanding that whenever an internal auditor does internal audit, everybody will agree that without the planning, if any audit is being conducted, it will not give the desired results, which not meet this objective, and it also impacts the overall collection of the evidences based on which the audit opinion or view or on a reporting is done by auditor. So first, we will discuss on the key aspects on the SIA 310, and then later discuss on SIA 320, which is internal audit evidences. So first is planning internal audit assignment. The planning is at 2 levels. One is an overall internal audit engagement planning, and second is the planning on the specific internal audit assignment or an engagement or a specific audit of a process, function, a specific plant, or any business entity or a subsidiary. So this SIA talks on a specific part of the overall internal audit. Internal audit can be for a 3-year or a 1 year, which lay down various process, function, department, entity, location, different plan location which has to be audited. That is covered in a different or on another standard. This specific standard, which is 310, talk on the planning internal audit assignment for a specific part of the overall internal audit. So before I go into detail, the specific introduction, which is laid down in the SIA 310, which talks about planning a particular part of the overall internal audit plan. So this speaks on a not only overall internal audit plan, but a specific function and a process which is planned to do audit either during a quarter or during the year or a period of 3 years. So once a process has been laid down, a plan has been laid down on overall audit function, when an auditor does a specific audit of that function, what planning has to be done, how the planning should be done, what are the key requirements of the planning, and what level of documentation will be required by the auditor before an auditor starts the work. So if you read the specific definition or which has been laid down in the standard, it says it covers the second level. This standard covers the second level, the planning for a particular part of an entity. So the overall planning is governed by separate internal audit standard. This specific standard talks only on a specific part of the overall internal audit plan while conducting an audit. Second is, what are the key elements of the internal audit plan which is laid down in the standard? It has three important aspects. One is a subset of the overall plan. This has to be done prior to start of the audit or at the beginning of the year, because it's important that planning significant time is spent by auditor and the audit team in doing the planning prior to start of the work at the beginning of the year. Since it is a specific in nature, specific time period, the time factor, resource allocation has to be factored during the planning. And the key elements and the outcome is the entire exercise is the internal audit assignment plan. For example, a simple HR payroll audit to be done, which is a part of overall plan. When an auditor plans that in the quarter 3, an HR audit has to be done. This has to be further bifurcated into whether HR has to be done at a corporate function or with a large organization which has multiple plan, multiple location, multiple branches. Entire plan has to be laid down which part of the entity has to be covered in entire HR and payroll. Once that has been laid down, then the second level detailing has to be done in the plan in terms of the timing of the audit, the level of resource that will be involved, the technology assessment in terms of what is the overall technology landscape, and the specific tool that is being used for a specific function. So all the planning has to be done prior to start of the year and for a specific function, and the outcome of this will be an internal audit assignment plan. So that document clearly lays down a very detailed roadmap onto when the audit will be done, what will be overall timelines, what frequency of work will be done during the entire audit execution, what methodology an auditor will follow, what will be the communication and reporting protocol, what is the period of frequency of monitoring the entire audit plan, and what escalation will be required, and at the end, what documentation will be made in terms of entire planning, execution, and monitoring. So what are the key objectives of the planning or internal audit? That is, what is the purpose? There are three important purposes or an objective is alignment, allocation, and audit procedure. First of all is an alignment. It has to align to the overall audit plan and align to expectation of the relevant stakeholders. Any plan which is, because this is for a specific function or a specific part of the overall audit plan, the first is it has to align to the overall audit plan. Suppose there is an audit plan for a year and all the audit has to be completed by a specific date. This specific part of the entity or part of the overall plan should also fall within the timelines which has been agreed with the management. So one is the alignment with the overall plan. Second, alignment with the expectation of the shareholder. So most important is when you're doing a specific audit. Internal audit covers certain processes and certain specialized processes. And third is also review of the technology or ITGC controls. How our overall scope has been defined, what methodology an auditor will perform during the course of audit, that will be the key. And the last will be allocation. When we say allocation, is an allocation that is the time and the resources. So it's no longer that audit will be done only by specific team of individuals. Now also there's a requirement that for a specific function, you also require a specialist into the team who will leverage their specialized knowledge and help the audit team to understand the technical aspect of the function. So it's no longer only review or audit of the commercial or finance control of that specific process. To give a specific example, for a pharma company, when you do an audit of a production, when there is a technical person, an engineer or a science graduate, they will bring the important aspect of a core operating function of that specific process. So it's a combination of a technical team, chartered accountants, MBAs, and the specialized team. So this all planning, why it is required at the start of the year before you start the audit, so that the entire resource allocation is back during the entire year. When there is a need for a specialist or an SME or a person with a special knowledge, at what level and what period of deployment will be done should be planned ahead. And the last will be what audit procedure auditor will perform that will enable to form and view on the overall control adequacy. So objective has to be, so it has to be met that alignment, allocation, and audit procedures. Alignment to the overall plan, alignment to the expectation, allocation of time and the team members, which includes specialists, SMEs, and the team members with the relevant experience. And the third will be audit procedure. And most important, has to confirm with the applicable pronouncement by Institute of Chartered Accountants. So any plan, how it has to be made, that will cover, and that specifies in the requirement of the plan. The key is what is the purpose and objective of plan. That any internal audit plan which is made should meet these objectives. The main aspect of the standard is what are the requirements. So there is a detailed list of what requirements are there when you define a plan. This can be bucketed into 4 important aspects. One is the entire planning process, the review and approval, and management discussion. That is the one aspect that every audit plan requires a specific planning process or comprehensive written document which says how the planning will be done, who will be involved in the planning, what will be the format templates we'll use for the planning, what will be the written document that we'll use to document every aspect of planning, what level of technology deployment or a resource allocation will also be included in planning. The first is the planning process. That planning process lays foundation for development of the internal plan. The second and most important is the independent review and approval of that plan. It comes from the concept of a maker-checker control mechanism where every preparer follows the principle of a process which is documented, and independent reviewer reviews it, and there is an approval mechanism. And the last between that is a management discussion. It is important that every planning document which has been reviewed, approved by if it is an in-house internal audit team, by a head of internal audit. If it is external, then the engagement manager, engagement director who is conducting that specific audit assignment has to be approved. And then with discussion with the management. The objective of discussion with management are 3 levels. One is management will be aware that when the specific audit will be conducted, who are the team members will be deployed for that engagement, what will be the overall audit procedures, and the last will be what will be the key information that auditor is seeking prior to start of the work. So that audit is also aware that there is a preliminary information, data, record, which auditor will ask prior to start of the audit that will help them in planning. So first aspect is the planning process, review and approval, and the management discussion. The second will be the entire risk assessment and technology assessment. Why technology assessment is required? Any function which is being audited, it can be purchase, sales, customer relationship, payroll, marketing, finance and accounts, treasury, taxation. What is the underlying technology being used by the function? Is there any enterprise tool being used by the client, by the company? Whether it is an integrated IT platform or within the function, is there any standalone tool being used? This is important. Why? Because most of the records are not digital. So unless an auditor will not plan ahead how the technology assessment will be done, in that case, the audit will be focusing more on the manual controls and documentation, and substantial part of the tech not be considered at all. So most important aspect is how the risk assessment will be done. That will help the auditor in understanding what are the key risks, what are critical risks, and which has to be covered during the audit. So that lays a foundation for the entire risk procedures and the control procedures to be covered during the audit for that specific part of the overall audit plan. The technology landscape, for example, either the company has either an SAP, Oracle, or any specific or Orban or Navision or any specific IT system being used, that has to be understood in detail. The third will be documentation, communication, and monitoring protocol. How the plan will be documented, to whom it will be communicated, how it will be monitored on periodic basis, what will be the reporting mechanism, and the last two important aspects which is covered in the standard requirement is comprehensive knowledge, and the second is the resource allocation. When we say comprehensive knowledge, is not only a specific understanding of the function, but understanding an overall business environment, overall operation, how this specific function which audit plays important role in overall organizational business objective. And based on that, then define the entire resource allocation and the team structure, team member structure who will be deployed during the audit. So it's no longer one or two individuals will be deputed and they will do end-to-end internal audit. I will give you an example of one is a real estate company. An audit of a project plan, when you're doing an audit of a large township or a mixed development or a commercial building or 1 million or 2 million square feet, a large building. If it is a planning and project execution construction, the understanding of the technicalities is required that a technical team member is also deployed. So you require a civil engineer to be deployed, you require an architect to be deployed along with team of chartered accountants. If the audit, if it is audited for a pharma company, if the audit is done for the production, R&D or demand and supply planning, you require specialties or a specialized person with specialized skill to do audit of R&D function with a background of similar nature of work, to understand the nuances of R&D. Mechanical engineer, chemical engineers to do audit of production in pharma companies. For demand and supply, you require specialists who understand the supply chain, understand the planning, and how the entire supply chain being planned by the in-house team. So all resource is required to be planned ahead, and all details are required to be included in the plan. Why it is required? So that adequate time is being spent on planning, and when it comes to execution, it is more of deployment of the plan, which will help to achieve the objective of the overall audit engagement. Similarly, when audit is being done for a consumer business or FMCG, the critical is supply chain. You require a supply chain specialist who understands the criticalities of the operation. So so one is to understand an overall business environment. What sector does a specific company belongs to, whether it's a manufacturing or chemical fertilizer company or real estate, infra, pharma, consumer business, or FMCG, or mutual fund, or banking financial institution. Depending on the core business operation, specialized team, SME, should be planned ahead upfront for the audit which has been planned in the future. So planning is no longer limited to just making a schedule or a time plan. It has to move beyond a normal planning document. It should include a significant data in terms of business operation, operating environment, the technology landscape, underlying IT controls, what are the various tools or standalone tool being used by the specific function, what type of a skill set or whatever personnel will be included during the audit, their profile, their level of involvement, the period of which they will be deployed, and the company, right from when the opening will be conducted, when the audit will be completed, when will be a closing meeting, where a deliverable will be submitted. So entire planning in detail should be included in your planning document. So the first is your planning, review and approval, comprehensive knowledge, management discussion. This is specific to technology deployment and resource allocation, which we just discussed on why technology deployment requires to be analyzed, understood prior to start of the audit, and why the same has to be included in your resource, in your internal audit plan document. The last requirement is on the documented plan, communication of the plan, and monitoring of the internal audit plan. Why require a documented internal audit? Because that document lays down the entire details of the plan, the entire details of your resource, your team, the entire time charter, the information requirement list, and how a communication will be done back to management, auditee, and the senior management. Similarly, communication of the internal audit, to whom it should be communicated, when it should be communicated, what should be the periodicity of the communication reporting. And the last aspect is why monitoring of internal audit plan. Monitoring important is how the execution is being done during the course of audit. Is there any changes or is there any major modification changes is required? And if it is required, how it has been done in consultation and whose approval will be required. So this monitoring will include all the protocols on how monitoring will be done, what are the triggers that will result into modification and revision, and whose approval will be required to make a changes to the audit assignment plan. And the most critical aspect of the entire audit plan is the documentation, because the documentation will help the auditor to communicate, demonstrate that the completion of the audit has been done in accordance with the plan. So a documentation will have a detailed planning process documentation or a specific checklist or a template that will lay down all the critical aspects of the planning, or a tool can be used in the entire planning process. What information is required or what information will be gathered by auditor prior to start of the audit or during the course of audit, prior to concluding an audit engagement. How summary of findings will be communicated, when the meeting will be done, how internal audit plan will be submitted to the management, and finally how it will be approved either by in-house team, or if it is completely outsourced, how it will be approved by a head of the engagement team. So before we move to the next standard, that is internal evidence, I would like to summarize the entire the critical aspect of the standard on planning the internal engagement is the planning process. It starts with the planning process and required a detailed documentation of how the planning will be done and how the document will be made on entire audit plan. what level of a comprehensive knowledge of the operation, a sector and a function is required, and what level of detailing will be included in the plan, how the risk assessment and technology deployment assessment will be made, what level of resource will be required, and how the planning of same should be done, and lastly, what documentation and communication and monitoring protocol will be followed. Happy to take questions on the standard either now or at the end of the session. Arun, should we move to the next session or?
Yes, sir. I suppose we can move. We have not got any.
Sure. So next is on the internal evidence, and evidences are critical during the engagement execution. Whenever a specific audit procedure is being implemented by auditor, evidences plays two important roles. One is the work that has been done by the auditor is aligned to the scope. Second, the exception or any specific information that auditor has gathered has to be supported by a specific evidence. So internal audit evidence refers to the information which is used by auditor in arriving based on which an auditor provides an opinion on a specific control adequacy. And these are obtained by auditor during the course of engagement, during the fieldwork, when the actual testing is being done by the audit team. The standards lays down a specific requirement in terms of how the documentation will be collected, means how the evidence will be collected, how the same will be written, that will enable for the subsequent review either by client or by functional head, or which is important for internal review going forward. So how the documentation will be upfront collected by auditor, how the same will be retained, that can be easily archived at a future stage. Because any audit procedure, after being conducted by auditor arrives at a conclusion in terms of control adequacy. If a specific controls are not providing the desired results, that has to be supported by an exception, and that exception is supported by an evidence. What are the critical objectives between laid down by the standard in terms of audit evidences? One is it confirms the audit procedure. First of all, evidences helps to confirm the audit procedure. To what extent audit procedure is, the nature of the audit procedure, the depth of the audit procedure being conducted by auditor, the timing and sufficiency. To give a simple example, an audit of a bank reconciliation or audit of a payroll. What is the level of audit procedure being done by auditor? Whether a simple a transaction-based audit being done by auditor, taking a certain sample, or through in-depth data analytics being done by auditor to first understand the trends, exceptions, and based on that exception, draw a sample to arrive at a conclusion. So the audit evidence is very important, that will support the nature of audit procedure being done. The second objective of audit evidences is helps in supervision and review. Every audit being done by an audit team, there has to be a review by a team leader or audit manager or an audit director. Evidences supports the audit procedure or testing being done by the audit team, and that helps a reviewer in making a decision saying that whether an audit was conducted in a manner which will help them to arrive at a conclusion whether the controls were adequate or not. So one is, it helps the auditor to confirm the audit procedure being done. And second and most important, it helps in supervision and review. So one is, it helps the audit team while conducting the audit procedure. The second is it helps the reviewer to establish that work has been done in alignment to the overall audit plan. Coming to the specific aspects of our audit evidence, one is the nature of evidence. It can be a simple documents in related to transaction. It can be bill, invoices, or it can be any arrangement between the two parties, which are contracts, agreements, work order, purchase order. And they are gathered either through verification, through testing, through inquiry, through confirmation. To give you two good example on the one is an inquiry or based on physical inspection. When an auditor does a review of a scrap, it's more of a physical inspection rather than checking any documents or records in support of how the scrap has been now stored at a specific scrapyard and how the dispatch is being done. This is more of a physical inspection. In terms of inventory, it's also physical inspection. So depending on the nature of the audit, the auditor has to then identify how the audit evidence will be collected. It can be either collection of various documents which will help to support the audit procedure being done, or it can be in form of either physical inspection or based on discussion with a functional head based on an inquiry, which will then convert into a discussion note and MOM. But the objective is whatever evidence the auditor has collected is to be substantiated with this specific functional head and auditing. So there are various methods how the evidence will be collected. One is a pure audit, testing, checking, where you compare various documents. Second is based on discussion and inquiry. Third is an observation or a physical inspection. When there is for example, a large infrastructure project, when audit is being done, it's more of a physical observation on when the material is received, what type of testing is being done. In case of real estate, when the material, what type of physical inspection being done, what equipment are being done, then later on review the document in support of the quality system. Similarly, material inward and outward at the manufacturing plant, an auditor can do a physical review at the security gate, saying what are the simple physical controls being implemented by function. So it's no longer evidence can only based on documents. There are evidences can be collected in different forms. The objective is the evidence should help an auditor to demonstrate the work being done, to help to achieve the objective that the work has been done in accordance with plan. And whenever an opinion or an exception is highlighted, the evidence should support the auditor of how the specific exceptions has been identified by audit team. The most important is then the reliability and consistency. So that important is the source. If it is an external source or internal source, within internal from where the evidences has been gathered. For example, simple contracts and agreement. Important aspect is what is the source of that specific information. Whether that contracts has been obtained from the functional head or from the centralized purchase team or commercial team, or it has been obtained from the finance. It is important that whether the agreements has been approved and it has been received from the reliable sources. So every evidence being collected, one is to establish the reliability of the source from where this information evidence is collected, and to document and communicate the same back to functional and audit team, saying that how the source was identified, to what extent the communication was used to obtain the evidence, and how the same was confirmed back, based on which an audit procedure was conducted. Most important aspect, the third is the recording process. One is the nature of evidence, which will play important role, helps the auditor in confirming whether the work has been done in accordance with the audit plan. exception highlighted are supported by evidences. The third is the source of the data, source of information. Last is recording the entire evidences. Need to have a robust process as a part of the planning process, how evidence will be collected and the same will be again retained so that they can be reproduced subsequently at any point of time. So data retention, data archival process has to be set and needs to have a very robust process of archiving the documents which can be reproduced at any point of time in future. And the last is on the documentation, where SI clearly lays down the procedure for how the documentation should be maintained by auditor as far as the evidences are concerned. So written process and policy required to be documented as part of the internal audit manual. First is how the documentation will be collected, what will the process will be followed by auditor, what are different forms of audit evidences the auditor should obtain, what process, approval process and confirmation process auditor will follow, and same should be documented in internal audit manual. And the last will be to what level of detail will be documented and cross-reference to the work paper that will help auditor to arrive at a specific conclusion. So before I close the session on the internal evidence, most of the three critical aspects of any evidence or any audit evidence will be: one is the nature of evidence, second is the source of evidence, the third is the recording process, and overall the policy which should be documented and should be incorporated part of internal audit manual of the overall how the auditor will identify the source, how it will be collected, how it will be recorded, and how it will be retained. Happy to take questions now or at the end of the session.
Sir, I would like to interrupt. The question answer, we have 3 to 4 questions that will be taken after Amit Jaiswal sir's session.
Sure.
After around 7:45.
Sure.
After complete. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your so much enlightening session. Now, for the second session of the day, the topic would be Standard or Internal Auditing 110 and 120. I would like to introduce and welcome CA Amit Jaiswal, sir, for his session. I would read out his brief profile first. Amit Jaiswal, sir, is a chartered accountant with more than 15 years of experience in internal audit. He leads the global internal audit function at Cipla and is associated with Cipla since past 9 years. At Cipla, he is responsible for global internal audit, design of controls, including IFC, risk analytics, statutory compliances, drafting of policies and procedures, and DOA. He has in-depth knowledge of pharmaceutical businesses, its processes, risks, and controls. In the past, he has worked in consulting firm RSM Astute Consulting for around 6 years. Welcome, Amit, sir.
Thank you very much, Vikash.
Welcome, sir.
I'm audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, International Standard Board, and Mr. Nandaji for giving me this opportunity to present in today's session. So I'm Amit Jaiswal. Today, the topic of my presentation is on internal standards on nature of assurance as well as internal controls. Okay, I'm sure that you will have read the standards in past, as well as you will perform the apply this during your professional engagements. What I like to touch upon is the key elements of these standards, as well as some practical examples from a corporate life perspective.
Is my screen up? Because is my screen up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Moving to the nature of assurance, which is a 110 standard of internal audit. Yeah, so this standard deals with those assignments wherein internal auditor needs to provide an opinion as per the desired or minimum requirements which needs to be followed while providing an opinion in the audit report. The objective of this standard is whether the internal auditor can provide an assurance. So we all know that the assurance can be provided by a statutory auditor. So the question over here is whether an internal auditor can provide an assurance. Another objective is what are the essential requirements which must be satisfied to provide an assurance, and what can be the nature of assurance, be it a reasonable assurance or a limited assurance, and under what circumstances it can be provided. So this is the overall objective of the standard. Keeping that in mind, this standard has been prepared and one has to follow the standard. Who can provide assurance? So within internal audit fraternity or internal audit colleagues, member of Institute of Chartered Accountant who holds certificate of practicing and conducting internal audit can provide this assurance. Member of ICAI working industry, be it public or private, and is a part of internal audit function of an organization can provide. Members of other professional bodies, even if you see, not only chartered accountants perform internal audit. When we go across various areas of a company, there are engineers, there are the quality people, there are the other professionals who provide assurance. So even they can provide assurance after adopting standards of performing the audit. And even the other stakeholders who are responsible to provide the assurance, they can also provide. So which engagements classify under assurance where an internal auditor can provide, and which engagements do not classify as an assurance for an internal auditor to provide? So any internal assignment which an internal auditor does, which provides a recommendation, will not form part of as an assurance. If there are any agreed upon procedures wherein a fact-finding activity has been asked by a company to be done by a professional, that will also not form part of as an assurance. The review of compliances towards statutory requirements or a consultancy engagement towards strategic review, due diligence to be performed, these do not form part of as an assurance whether if internal auditor performs this. So for example, if a strategy is reviewed, there the assumptions which are required to perform to prepare the strategy, those are reviewed, those are challenged, and a conclusion is drawn. Now this cannot be an assurance. Now what are the engagements where the internal auditor can provide an assurance? Is internal control over financial reporting, ICFR, and an IFC. So by performing this, an internal auditor can provide an assurance to the organization and even to the board as well as to the management. So the components of assurance assignment, there are three components, major components. First is in terms of who are the parties involved in this assurance engagement. There are three parties who are involved. One is internal auditor, one is auditee, and the other is assurance user. So internal auditor is the professional person who performs the internal audit, and auditee is a team whom the audit is performed, and the assurance user is the board and the audit committee. So they, at the end, whatever assurance is provided needs to be provided to the board as well as audit committee members. so that they gain confidence in the internal control matters and the effectiveness of the control of the organization. The another element or the other component is the subject matter, a predefined criteria, and a conclusive outcome. What is subject matter? Subject matter is the area which an individual takes up on to provide an assurance. There can be a financial performance, there can be an operational performance, there can be a system related performance, be it IT systems controls, ITGC, or there can be a compliance related or a procedural compliance related subject matters. So these are the subject matters one needs to take up while performing the while providing an assurance. Predefined criteria is a set of stipulated mechanisms or methodology provided by certain guidelines through a guidelines. For example, the IND AS, which is provided by the Institute of Chartered Accountant, needs to be followed while performing these engagements. And the conclusive outcome is, after the engagement is performed by following a set defined criteria, the conclusion has to be clear. There should be a conclusion in terms of whether the controls are effective or not effective. So that is a conclusion one needs to provide while providing an assurance. And the last element is a written report. While auditor will need to submit a written report to provide assurance to the management as well as the board. So these are the major components which one has to follow. So I have done with the assurance on the assurance. I'll move on to the next standard, which is 120 internal controls. So what is the objective now? Again, the objective of this is to if this standard is to clarify the responsibility of the management and the auditors over the internal controls and how the certain requirement needs to be met to assess and evaluate and report to the independent assurance over the controls, internal controls. So this is the overall objective. The purpose of this standard is to provide common terminology of internal control. Now, internal control, different people may think internal control from a different perspective, okay? And to avoid all those ambiguities, this standard defines what do you mean by control and how to mitigate the control. What are the risks which an organization will face and how the control will be mitigated. Responsibility of the management and the auditor towards the internal control, and specific certain requirements which needs to be met to provide an assurance over the controls. This is a regulatory framework on the IFC or ICFR. So there are certain responsibilities as under the Companies Act 2013. There are certain responsibilities which has been defined towards various stakeholders on the IFC or ICFR. So now Board of Directors has a responsibility statement to ensure that the IFC framework is laid down, that the IFC testing is performed, and the controls are effective and operating on a continuous basis. So this is required for a listed company. For a non-listed company, the control will be the board will require an assurance in terms of ensuring the internal control over financial reporting. Operation control does not mandate for a non-listed company. Auditors will require to state whether the controls are again defined, they are operating effectively. The testing needs to be done by the auditor in order to give an assurance to the board members, to the audit committee members. So this is a responsibility statement for the auditors. Audit committee has a responsibility to ensure that the internal control systems are working and they get an assurance from the auditors as well as management, including the independent directors will need an assurance from the management as well as auditors whether the controls are effective or not. Now, any organization will face various risks across all the different areas. So those risks needs to be mitigated. So certain risk or exposure are like entity level exposures. Now, what is example of entity level exposure is, for that entity level controls are defined. So for example, entity level control will be having a delegation of authority, having a board governance, having a strong compliance system within the organization, strong financial reporting compliance. These are part of entity level controls, which is overarching across the functions or the business or the processes. So ELC needs to be defined. This controls will be defined for an auditor to test and give an assurance. The another exposure or another biggest risk is the financial exposure, wherein the ICFR, Internal Control over Financial Reporting, provides an assurance after. So the risk is defined, the controls are defined in this ICFR, and the testing is performed by the auditor to give an assurance by performing it through an ICFR. There are various processes in the organization, like procure to pay, order to cash, HR, and admin, and all stuff like that. Now, these processes will also have a risk within them, which needs to be defined. And the control which needs to be needs to be in place has to be defined, and those needs to be tested. The operational risk will be the manufacturing operations which a company will face. And the last will be the IT risk. The IT will be a sort of excess risk, IT general control risk, okay, which needs to be mitigated. Now, there is a risk in terms of cyber security. This is the major risk. So now the companies need to define the controls around the cyber security risk and do the testing and ensure that the controls are effective. Now, what are the type of the control? There are different types of controls. There are automated controls and manual controls. More and more the organization shifts towards automated control, the risk will mitigate. The level of comfort to the management as well as board will enhance significantly. On an average, if we try to benchmark, the automated controls in an organization will be less than 50%. But now with this virtual environment of working, more and more automated controls are being implemented, because now the manual activities have been reduced significantly, and the automation is the need for going forward. So there will be reduction in manual controls, and automated controls will enhance. For one example which I would like to give is three-way matching. Now, previously we could ensure that this could have been done through manually. Now it has to be automated in terms of my PO, GRN, and invoice. All are through a workflow gets tested. So if there is no PO, GRN will not be made. If GRN is not there, invoice cannot be booked. Before booking invoice, there will be a duplicate check if this invoice has been processed, and before making a payment, a check will be performed whether the payment has been made. So the entire control gets automated in be it whatever system which we use, be it SAP or be it any other system. The another important aspect is a preventive control. Now, it is better to have a preventive control rather than having a detective control. And few examples or few ways of having a preventive control are having a strong masters. There are various masters which a company will have, like vendor master, customer master, price master, dealers master. Lots of masters will be there. The material master. Now, if the masters are strongly developed, for example, if vendor master is the vendor bank account numbers are there in the master, which gets auto picked while making the payment, and there is no manual intervention. This will avoid any manual error as well as of any fraud which may occur. So preventive control, another example of preventive control is having a strong policies and procedures. So for example, again, I'll take a similar example. If there is a request from any vendor for changing a bank account, which is a recent cases which most of the organizations are facing is a cyber risk, wherein the perpetrator will do the phishing. He'll get an access of the emails of one of the employee. He can modify the mail and send as he is the original request. He is the person who is requesting. If there is no control, if the policy is not clear, the fraud may happen. The perpetrator may ask to change the bank account. The employee will change the bank account and disburse the payment. If there is a preventive control, such as if there is a change in asking the change of bank account, there can be an confirmation from the vendor through a phone call, through a separate conversation. Have you asked? Send a small 10 rupees or small payment to the vendor and ask him to confirm whether he has received the payment. These are various, other than routing through an email, a phone call, or a different sort of engagement can help us to prevent these frauds. So these preventive controls help us to prevent frauds, and more and more preventive control will enhance the control and the governance of the organization. And we should avoid, there should be a detective control. That's where auditors play a role of detecting the control gaps. Okay, so here the two important elements are automated and preventive control. And I have touched upon the fraud control, wherein there can be a fraud which an organization will face, which can be prevented by having a strong policies and procedures and strong controls. These are various responsibilities of boards and management, which we have touched upon in my earlier slide, in terms of what are the responsibility. The responsibility on a listed company is from a LODR also, which is listing obligation and disclosure requirement of regulation 2015. Now under this, the compliance officer as well as CEO and CFO needs to sign the responsibility statement of saying that there is internal controls for over financial reporting are effective and internal control of the listed entity is operating effectively. So even statutory auditor needs to has a responsibility to report. This is the responsibility of the internal auditor to ensure that the controls are in place, that they are defined. So the IFC, I'll say, plays a key driver or a key enabler to define the controls, to identify the risks at various levels, to define the controls which are required, and to define the testing steps. So this becomes a big enabler, and which internal auditor needs to test this to give an assurance to the management as well as board. Thank you. I'm done with my presentation. Happy to answer any questions and answers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful session. Yes, we do have a few questions. Shall I start, or sir, you need a 2-minute break?
No, we can go ahead.
Okay.
If Divyang is comfortable. Okay.
Hello, Divyang sir. Are you there?
Yeah. Please.
Yeah. Shall I start with the question, sir?
Please.
Yes. The first question is, for how many years documents are required to be kept?
Sorry, how many years?
for how many years the documents are required to be kept?
When you no, I didn't understand the question. How many years? What to be kept? Okay, sorry. Okay. How many years the evidences is required to be kept?
Yes,
right?
the documents or the evidences. Yes, sir.
So, like I said, of evidences. So, documentation is the only the evidences in support of work done, the conclusion arrived, and the deliverable submitted. Right. So, there is no specific timeline. Okay, how many years? It has to be retained by auditor because nobody knows when there will be query either from the functional head itself, or if it's an outsourced audit by the company or management board or from regulatory. The important is need to have a good archiving system, a database management system, which will help to retain document for a longer period.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question
I like to add over here to Divyang's comment. For example, income tax will define the number of years to which document needs to be retained. Companies that will have a different set of requirements. Mostly, in a general, companies try to maintain around the documents for 8 years. While there is no what do you say, that the authorities can go even back before they can ask document pertaining to 10 years, 15 years, but it depends upon the regulators. Yes, generally it is 8 years when detailed document is required.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. The next question is, as an internal auditor, why the auditor should accept an engagement where technical and professionals connected to the specific industry are required?
Sorry, can you sorry? Because
I'll just repeat, sir. As internal auditor, why the auditor should accept an engagement where technical and professionals connected to the specific industry are required?
Okay, so when you do an internal audit, right? Internal audit does not only involve only finance process or a finance function. Internal audit covers a larger aspect of the operations of a company. And when you do operational audit or operation process, you require an auditor with a specialized skill and knowledge. That's the reason you will require a technical person who will have a thorough knowledge of that function. So give a very simple example. If your audit is doing for a banking operation, you require a person who have a sound knowledge of finance. If it is mutual fund, a technical person with a thorough knowledge of the mutual fund industry is required. If you're doing a pharmaceutical company, life science company, a person who can understand the operation at the production, R&D, supply chain, which are the core function of a pharmaceutical company. So when you take an audit of such companies, you require technical expertise and SME who understand the core function of that specific company. Because it's no longer audit restricts only to financial or commercial process. There's a larger thrust on the operating risk. And that's the reason when you cover operations, you require technical expertise who understands in detail the operation, which is a core function of that organization.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Again, I like to add over here, Vikas.
Yes, sir.
Divyang, I completely agree with what you have said. And we also try to leverage the expertise of the technical team members. Okay. And the quality of output which comes is significant, which a normal professional chartered accountant who does audit will not be able to go in that depth. For example, for a pharmaceutical company, quality becomes a very significant area, right? For those, a quality is a B farm or a qualified quality auditors are used, which are similar to US FDA sort of qualifications. Okay. Now the level of depth or the expertise which they will bring, definitely we will not have. Similarly with pharmacovigilance, there are various technical areas, be it pharmaceutical or any other industry, which are very technical. Okay. And more and more we should try to rope in the technical expertise to get the in-depth knowledge of that area, as well as the depth of the review becomes very significant.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question is whether the evidence electronically obtained is acceptable as per the standards on internal auditing. Is there any specific guidance by the institute on this issue?
So records can be in any form. The objective is evidence should support two important aspects: the procedure which is being done by auditor, means for a specific scope, what audit procedure being implemented by auditor, the evidence should support that. The conclusion which auditor arrives, evidence should support the auditor. It can be in manual form, hard copies, or electronic form. The objective is it should help auditor to demonstrate that the work has been done, which were required to demonstrate that the scope as per the scope, the work has been done. Second, whatever deliverable auditor has submitted are based on the evidence collected by auditor. So it can be in any form. It can be manual, it can be electronic. So the standard says what documentation, what policy the auditor should develop, which will help him to demonstrate the work being done and the conclusion arrived.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, shall I proceed, Amit sir?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Sir, the next question is, can an internal audit evidence be in the nature of taped conversation between the audit team and the auditee?
Sorry, a conversation between
the audit team and the auditee.
Recorded conversation. You mean recorded conversation?
Yes.
Recorded. No. Like, see, the evidence has to be like a document or based on visual inspection, which has to be supported by an actual activity. Recording, we and I have never come across such evidences. Amit, have you ever?
No. Recording. See what happens, Vikas. Let's try to understand why recording conversation will be required. Let me put it other way. Recording conversation is not required to be shown as a documentation. Whatever discussion happens, I am an auditor, you are an auditee. Whatever we discuss, okay, even if you record for your reference, for future reference, you need to send an email saying this is the minutes of meeting. Okay. Now that becomes an evidence that I have understood your process, and this is the understanding which I have got.
Hello.
Fine. Auditee confirms that this is I have understood your process and I am doing the auditing. I am auditing this. This is the understanding which I have got.
Okay.
So email communication and all the documents, either scanned or a physical form document, becomes this. Recording does not.
Evidence.
You cannot hold anyone on the basis of showing that you have recorded your statement. It becomes, in fact, it becomes illegal to record someone without asking him or her.
Without their permission.
Without their permission. It cannot be held accountable in the code of law as well.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Last question for the day. Do we have any comprehensive list to ensure that internal audit process has been properly followed?
Comprehensive list in support of?
Comprehensive list to ensure that the complete internal audit process has been followed during the assignment.
So there are various checklists, various details are there, but the objective is when you make a inter-audit plan document, you should lay down the procedure, you should lay down the plan, timelines, the profile of the team member, the understanding of the function, the technology, which lay down all the important aspect of that specific process or a function. That is a fundamental requirement before you start an audit. right? The procedure and approach lays down how the audit will be conducted and what evidences will be collected, how communication of the finding, query, observation will be communicated to auditee. So everything should be laid down in a planning document, the outcome of which will be your audit report.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I would like to add on this, what Divyang mentioned is the firms, the various firms will have a checklist of various processes which one can use as a guideline. It should not be that only these aspects one needs to check, right? Because a same process, organization for different organization, it will differ, right? For a procurement to pay, a checklist can be a checklist of one company cannot be applied to another company as it is. So the checklist can be used as a guidance.
Okay.
One has to understand each and every aspect of the process. One has to understand the process, understand the controls around that process, and whether the controls are manual or automated, and then accordingly do the testing to get a desired output of an exception. If the controls are manual, my sampling methodology will change. If the controls are automated, my sampling method, because if it is automated, I can do the entire risk analytics or analytics on the entire set of data, 100% population. When it is manual, I'll have to rely on few samples, which there is a guidelines in the IFC as well. So this is where the professional needs to approach any area.
Okay, sir. Thank you. One last question and a very small question. Can you please brief the major controls for the pharma company? The controls that needs to be looked upon.
Okay. So I'll bucket it into various functions and businesses. Okay. So from a business standpoint, there will be controls around the pricing, say order to cash, the control around pricing, the control around getting order from customers, sales, invoicing, around that. The control which is around the operation side is manufacturing processes, yield, production, quality, as I mentioned, is very important function for a pharmacovigilance. For a pharma company, quality becomes an important control. Another aspect is my corporate functions, like financial report, which will be common for any other company, well, like HR, payroll, financial reporting, my admin, legal, compliances, in compliance towards DPCO compliance, NPPA compliance, UCPMP compliance, GMP compliance. The compliance is very important for a pharma company, and hence the control needs to be defined around this and needs to be tested.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, we have got 2 to 3 new questions at the end of the session. Would you like them to take up?
No worries. Still, we have time, I think.
Yes, we surely have. Yes.
We can take this.
The next question is, how can we verify whether the employees are colluding with vendors or not? Is there a way to find out whether employees are in receipt of consideration from vendors?
Should I take up? Should I take this?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So this becomes a fraud risk. Okay. Whether their employee is in collusion with the vendor. Now, there is no, it cannot be easily identified. I'll say certain controls which one has to perform to try to evaluate whether these frauds are there or not. One is the vendor master reconciliation between vendor master as well as employee master. Okay, what happens is now there can be a situation where employee is conflicted with any vendor. For example, he may have a stake, or he may be part of that, maybe a director or maybe a partner in that vendor. He may bring that vendor as into the company, and he may introduce because he knows the process. Okay, he may introduce. But sometimes what happens, the address, the phone number of employee, okay, the PAN number of employees, sometimes they are common to a vendor. Okay, and whenever we have performed this test, we have found cases where employee phone number, employee address, employee PAN number, or even family members, I'll say. Employee family members, because it should not be restricted to employee.
Indirectly with the families also.
Family also. And those data are available. I like to highlight that the employee family data is available with us through a mode of insurance declaration. Right?
Yes.
So I have to give a declaration. I have to say that my wife, my parents has to be covered. So I'll give those basic information, right? So those information are available. So these things, I think, so one should do a check to get a comfort, at least that in terms of if there are any exceptions. Okay. The another way of dealing with this is a strong whistleblower mechanism. More and more vendors should be educated, or maybe that the policy should be strong, wherein vendor can come and tell that there is some wrong in organization, you need to look. So whistleblower mechanism or a code of vendors are maybe motivated to bring out, to highlight these things. And they
Sir, bolo.
Sorry. Yeah. So these are the various controls which one organization can put up.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Divyang sir, would you like to add?
No, nothing.
Yeah.
Because if you can share the questions, we can provide them offline. No problem.
Okay. I'll ask.
You can share the questions with us, and then we will happy to respond.
Okay, sir. So for the vote of thanks, I would like to call upon C. Arun Subramanian, sir, the chairman of the Kozhikode branch of SIRC. Hello.
Yeah, thank you, Vikas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So it was a really enlightened session by both our faculties for the day. So both the faculties have thoroughly enlightened and given us a deep insight and a good understanding on all the 4 standards which was taken up for discussion as part of this seminar. Also, the questions have been, we might get to know from the questions which are being raised from the audience, how important the session has been, and the session's importance has been greatly taken into consideration by all the members, I said. So we have almost 1,800 plus participants today for this seminar. So I hope all members have benefited from today's seminar. So now let me get into my task of giving the vote of thanks. So on behalf of Kozhikode branch of ICAI and also on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Boards of India, I thank both the faculties, Sri Amit Jaiswal ji and Divyang Desai sir, for giving us great insight on the topic of internal audit standards and how it is important to plan an audit and also to carry out the audit in the benefiting manner, so that we are also getting some details on our hand to showcase that our work has been carried out with most importance, which shows our responsibility as well. Thank you, sir, for giving us this enlightened session. On the absentia, I take this opportunity to thank our Central Council member and Chairman of IASB, Charanjot Singh Nanda sir, and Sri Amit Bhandari sir, who has given us this opportunity for making us the host branch and carrying out this seminar today as a host branch. Thank you, sir. Also, all the members of the IAS Internal Audit Standard Board who are behind the seminar, who have been a great inspiration to us, who has been handling this the technical team or other the secretarial team, whoever it may be, who have been taken pain to carry out the seminar in this best possible manner. And all the members on the board like Vikas Gupta sir, Arun Agarwal sir, Ardi Bansal sir, everybody on behalf of Kozhikode branch, I extend a warm thanks to all of you for carrying out this session in this most benefiting manner. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So over to Vikas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Divyang sir. Thank you, Amit sir, for their wonderful session. Also, a very big thank you to CA Charanjot Singh Nanda sir, the Central Council member, the Internal Audit Standard Board chairman. He has always been on the front end when it comes to sharing knowledge on internal audit. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.